These are the interviews from Chat City on Preston FM. Don't forget, our show is live weekdays from 10 till noon. Tune in and become part of our family.
You're listening to Chat City on 103.2 Preston FM. It's 11:38 and I'm very pleased to welcome Anna Watson. Hello, Anna.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're from the archive, Lancashire Archive on Bow Lane?
That's right, I am, yes.
And we normally have Vicky McCann from there, don't we?
Yes, you do, yes.
And somebody else, Kate Newman.
We've
had
well.
in the past, yeah.
Yes.
You're a senior archivist there. Is that how you pronounce it?
It is, that's quite correct.
Archivist.
Yes, it is. Yes, archivist.
Not archivist.
No, it is archivist.
All right, but what kind of things go on at the archive? Just give us a quick overview.
Well, we are the record office for the county of Lancashire. And we look after the written records of the county. Our earliest document dates from about 1118, but we also have records from the 21st century as well in digital format. So everything from what's written on paper and parchment to digital media.
And tell me, is there a difference between the Lancashire Records Office, which I've heard of, which is also co-located even with you, and yourselves? What's the difference?
Well, there isn't a difference. We had a change of name a couple of years ago. We were the Lancashire Record Office, and then about a couple of years ago we became Lancashire Archives. But the building is still referred to as the Record Office. But you're quite right, it does lead to a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, well, I was confused.
You were confused,
you're
yes.
quite right there. So it's a big square building, isn't it?
It is. It's a very, very uninspiring, perhaps I shouldn't say that, 1970s piece of architecture. It's a concrete building on stilts. You can't miss it if you drive down Bow Lane. It sort of dominates one side of it.
So equivalent to the bus station?
Possibly, yes. Smaller.
New brutalist architecture?
Yes, quite.
Mm. And presumably you've got a controlled environment in there in terms of temperature and
we
air
do.
Changes and stuff?
We do. We have 8 strong rooms and we house roughly about 9 miles of shelving on the one site. And we have records from almost every imaginable source. Businesses, churches, hospitals, schools, what else? Police, that's records of the police officers rather than the criminals. We have records that relate to the historic county of Lancashire. So, of course, we have records of the Courts of Quarter Sessions, which date back to the 16th century. We have church court records, which, equally go back as far. A very, very wide range of material, maps, plans, photographs, you name it. There isn't much we haven't got. Some
interesting stuff. What about public access to all of this?
Well, we are open 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. We open at 9 in the morning, except for Thursday when we open at 10. And we're open late on a Tuesday evening, as we are tonight, till 8:30. And we're open the second Saturday of every month from 10 till 4. So we're open this Saturday.
So you're pretty busy?
Yes, we are actually. We are very busy, especially in the last few weeks. We've had quite a number of new customers come along to use the services, to trace their family history or perhaps look into some other aspect of Lancashire's history.
And you're also pretty proactive, aren't you? You organise events and take part in things.
We do. We've got this, of course, March is Women's History Month, and we're starting a series of talks, not just for this month, but into the spring, which will take place every Tuesday from now till I think it's June. And there are 4 talks this particular month for Women's History Month, and I'm giving one myself this evening.
And that's about domestic violence.
It is. It's about looking at primary source material for researching the history of violence against women in the 18th and 19th centuries.
It's about looking for primary source material.
Primary source material,
so
yes.
It's not a history of domestic violence?
No, it's not. It's how to help researchers who might be interested in that subject to know what sort of written records they might expect to find or hope to find relating to that subject, partly because it is quite difficult to find information on that subject. The position of women in the 18th and 19th century was very, very different from how it is today. They lived a very different sort of life. Once they were married, they became their husband's property. And a certain amount of physical abuse was seen as acceptable. And many women did not know that they had recourse to the law, or even if they did know, if they sought a divorce or separation of some kind, they could find themselves homeless, penniless, without access to their children, and they would have lost the protection of their husband, which was one thing a woman needed when she was married.
So history of women is quite hard to find then because of their social position in those 2 centuries.
It is really, unless perhaps the lady came from a well-to-do family or was perhaps at a higher level in society where she might have a more famous profile. I mean, there are a couple of very famous women, Caroline Norton in particular in the 19th century, who did much to advance the cause of women who suffered from domestic abuse in marriages, and introduced the Matrimonial Act in 1857, which went some way to improving the position for women who wanted to apply for a divorce, although adultery was still the prime reason that you had to stipulate for divorce. You couldn't just ask for a divorce on the grounds of cruelty. It would have to be cruelty and adultery.
You were saying that in those 2 centuries, domestic abuse was accepted. That means that basically it can be a non-event, surely. So documenting it is
yes,
going to be
exactly,
difficult.
Exactly. That is one of the problems. And what has surprised me is that our volunteers are currently working on some of the Quarter Sessions court records from the 18th and 19th centuries, and they have actually come across documents from women who have gone to a magistrate to complain about their husband's treatment of them, sometimes documenting perhaps years of abuse, where perhaps they've reached a point where they actually fear for their lives and perhaps of that of their children. But all they really go to court for is to get what the modern equivalent might be a restraining order. They sort of acknowledge that, their husband is probably basically a good man, but really they would like the court to tell him to stop behaving like this. And that's about as much as you get. But these documents are very, very detailed. And the woman will say, in what way the husband has abused her, whether it's been verbally or physically, whether he's been drunk or not. Whether he's threatened other members of the family, perhaps who's come to their aid, perhaps if there have been servants in the house who might have helped them, that sort of thing. And the husband, if he is caught and brought to court, he might be fined, he might be told, he might be bound over to keep the peace. In very, very rare cases are they imprisoned.
So that's sort of official court records you're talking about. That's one primary source. What about things like private diaries that women might have kept?
Well, yes, there is a very famous lady from Lancashire, Elizabeth Shackleton, who lived at Brewsham Hall, who kept the most wonderful diaries. And of course, diaries are going to have been kept by literate women, so perhaps again from a higher level in society. And she kept very, very detailed diaries about all sorts of things. And although her first marriage was a very happy one, her second marriage sadly was not. And her husband, who was quite considerably younger than her, did abuse her terribly according to her diaries. And of course we have to recognise that we only do get one side of the story with these documents. So we can't know what the husband perhaps thought about all this. But she kept very detailed diaries, and these are accessible, and people can come to the record office and see them and read about all aspects of Elizabeth's life, not just the abuse, but she does record it. But at the same time, she still often prays for her husband's health and happiness, and perhaps in a way feels that perhaps the violence was partly her fault. And again, that was another idea that was reinforced, that women perhaps, as we might see nowadays, they asked for it. And that, of course, would not be the case at all. But I think women did feel in a very difficult, a very confined situation with very little ways of sort of getting out of their situation without, perhaps, as I've already said, risking homelessness and being without money and being unable to remarry as well. I'm inclined to think that maybe things haven't changed enormously, even in our times, but we're not talking about present times. No.
Has Elizabeth Shackleton's diary been published by any chance?
They haven't been published, but there is a wonderful book by Amanda Vickery, who is from Preston, and her book is called A Gentleman's Daughter, and it is talking more generally about the life of women in Georgian England, but she does talk at length about Elizabeth Shackleton's diaries, and if somebody wanted to read about Elizabeth Shackleton and about her life and read bits from the diary, her diaries, then that would be an excellent book to start with. I would highly recommend that.
So Amanda Vickery is someone who's been to the Lancashire Archive and presumably spent quite a long time there.
Yes, she has, because she's been on the television and everything, and she, as I say, she's from Preston and often comes back to Preston to support events at the university and so on.
So your talk takes place tonight?
It does. It starts at 6:30. It's free. And it's just a question of coming along to the record office, and it takes place in the lecture room in the building.
Or the archive, as we call it these days.
Or the archive, yes.
So 6:30 in the lecture room at the Lancashire Archive this evening, and it's free?
Yes.
OK. We'll talk about that again later. We'll remind people about it later in the show, which actually is coming towards its end. You said there were 4 talks in total going on.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the other 3 and when they are and what they're about?
I can, certainly. On Tuesday the 11th of March, Dr. Elizabeth Roberts is giving a talk on working wives and mothers in the textile industry, and that's working with oral history interviews. And on Tuesday the 18th of March, Dr. Jill Liddington from the University of Leeds will be giving a talk, Vanishing for the Vote, the Suffragette Census Boycott Across Lancashire. And on Tuesday the 25th of March, Andrew Walmsley, who's a community heritage manager, will be talking about women's suffrage in Lancashire, sources and resources.
Excellent. And presumably the information on these talks can be found on a website somewhere?
Yes, it's on our own website, which is www.archives.lancashire.gov.uk. But there's also a leaflet which you might find in your local library or your local tourist information centre. And that's got all the talks on it that run up into June as well, not just this month's.
So the message is go to the Harris Museum and Art Gallery and find that.
Yes, and find that there. Hopefully, there should be one there. Yes.
Presumably, do you have a reception desk where they can pick that up?
In the record office?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes, and the leaflets are widely available. So if anybody wanted just to come into the office to pick one up, that would be wonderful. Okay,
brilliant. So tell me once again about this evening's talk.
I'm going to give a talk about sources, primary source material that's available at the record office for researching the history of violence against women in the 18th and 19th centuries.
So if anybody wants to write a book, a novel, which features women in the 18th and 19th centuries, then you're the place to go.
I think we most certainly are. We're very pleased to see anyone who'd like to come along.
That's brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Anna Watson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the interviews as much as we have. Why not give us a tweet at ChatCityPFM?